After 5 years of trying, I was finally pregnant. I planned the perfect announcement at our favorite restaurant. Instead, my husband said, "I've been cheating on you with your sister," when he later wished for my miscarriage. His smug smile disappeared as I revealed my final card. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into the story. Dean and I had been married for 5 years. To anyone looking in from the outside, we were the very definition of a power couple. 2 successful doctors. A beautiful colonial house with a wraparound porch in a quiet suburb. A life that seemed meticulously built on a foundation of mutual respect, shared ambition, and a deep, unwavering love. And for the most part, that perception was true. Our life wasn't a fairy tale. Of course, our careers were incredibly demanding. The hours were brutal. There were weeks when we felt more like ships passing in the night than a husband and wife. One of us dragging in from a grueling 36-hour shift just as the other was rushing out, coffee in hand, for an early morning surgery. More often than I'd like to admit, dinner was cold takeout eaten in a shared, exhausted silence. The unspoken understanding being that we were both too drained for anything more. But we always found our way back to each other. A weekend away. A quiet evening on the porch with a bottle of wine. A simple, knowing glance across a crowded room. Those were the moments that recharged us. He was my partner, my confidant, my rock. In the entire 5 years of our marriage, through all the stress and the exhaustion, I had never once entertained a single shred of doubt that I would be spending the rest of my life with him. But there was a quiet ache in the center of our seemingly perfect life. A missing piece in our carefully constructed picture. A baby. When we first exchanged our vows, we were giddy with plans for the future. And starting a family was at the top of that list. We were young. We were healthy. We were deeply in love. It seemed like the most simple and natural next step in our journey. But it just never happened. The first year was a blur of hopeful optimism. Every month was filled with possibility, with secret smiles and shared knowing looks. Then the second year began, and that bright-eyed optimism started to tarnish, replaced by a quiet, gnawing anxiety. We did what any doctors would do. We turned to science. We saw specialists, the best in the field. We were poked, prodded, and subjected to a battery of tests that were as emotionally draining as they were physically invasive. The verdict was frustratingly inconclusive. Unexplained infertility. They called it. There's no clear reason. They'd say with a practiced, sympathetic smile. Just keep trying. Relax. Relax. It's funny how the one piece of advice everyone gives you is the one thing that's utterly impossible to do. I remember one specific Tuesday night. It was raining. A cold, miserable November evening. I was in the bathroom, staring at yet another stark white pregnancy test with its single, mocking pink line. It felt like the 100th one. I just sank to the floor. The cold talus shock against my skin. And I broke down. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the silent, shoulder-shaking kind that come from a place of deep, exhausted defeat. Dean found me there a few minutes later. He didn't speak. He just slid down to the floor behind me, wrapped his strong arms around me, and held me. He absorbed my grief into his own body, his chin resting on the top of my head while I cried it all out. It was after that night that we made a conscious, painful decision. We would stop trying. We would stop letting our lives revolve around ovulation cycles and temperature charts. We would pack away the dream of a baby, tucking it into a corner of our hearts, and focus on what we did have, each other and our careers. We told ourselves that if it was meant to be, fate would find a way. Letting go is agonizing, but it was also liberating. We poured our energy back into our work, into our relationship, and we found a new rhythm. A new, albeit different, kind of peace. And then, about 2 months ago, the universe decided to play a trick on me. I started waking up feeling off. A strange wave of nausea would roll over me the second my alarm went off. A sour taste in my mouth. For the first few days, I dismissed it. Stress. I reasoned. Something I ate. A stomach bug I must have picked up at the hospital. But after a solid week of this same unwelcome morning greeting, a tiny, flickering spark of hope, a spark I thought had been extinguished years ago, began to glow in the darkness. I was terrified to even acknowledge it. I couldn't bear the thought of that kind of disappointment again. But the feeling persisted. One afternoon, on my way home from a long shift, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of a CVS. I walked the aisles in a daze, picking up toothpaste and shampoo before finally making my way to the family planning aisle. I grabbed a pregnancy test, hiding the box under a bag of cotton balls as if it were contraband, my cheeks flushing when I got to the checkout counter. That night, I waited until I heard the steady, deep breathing of Dean asleep in our bed. I felt like a spy in my own home, tiptoeing into the master bathroom and locking the door behind me. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure it would wake him. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the little plastic stick. I followed the familiar, dreaded instructions, placed the test on the edge of the sink, and set a 3-minute timer on my phone. I couldn't bring myself to watch it. I stared at my own reflection in the mirror, at my pale, anxious face, and waited. It was the longest 3 minutes of my entire life. When my phone buzzed softly on the counter, I squeezed my eyes shut for a second, said a silent prayer, and then looked down. 2 pink lines. Bright, clear, and undeniable. A strangled gasp escaped my lips, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle the sound. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. After all this time, after all the tears, after we had finally, truly given up, it was happening. I slid down the wall to the floor, the same cold tile floor where I had cried so many tears of despair. And this time I cried tears of pure, unadulterated, overwhelming joy. I was pregnant. We were going to have a baby. My first overwhelming instinct was to burst into the bedroom, leap onto the bed, and scream the news until Dean woke up. But he wasn't there. At that very moment, he was at a week-long medical conference in Chicago. And this news, this miraculous, life-altering news was too big, too precious to be shared over a crackly phone line or in a sterile text message. No, this moment deserved more. It deserved a celebration. I wanted to see his face, to witness the shock and joy dawn in his eyes with my own. So, I decided to wait. For 5 whole days, I held this beautiful, perfect secret inside me. A warm, glowing coal in my chest. It was my secret. Our secret. And I began to plan the most perfect surprise I could imagine. I called the Oak Room, our favorite restaurant, the place where he had proposed to me under the twinkling fairy lights on the patio. I made a reservation for the day he was due to return. I pictured it all so clearly. We'd be at our usual table by the window. I'd let him tell me all about his trip. And then, when the moment was just right, I would slide the positive pregnancy test across the table to him. I played the scene over and over in my head. I could already picture the joyous, disbelieving look on his face. It was going to be the beginning of the next and best chapter of our lives. The day of Dean's return. I felt like I was practically with excitement. It was a beautiful, crisp autumn day. I took the morning off from the hospital, a rare indulgence, and spent it in a state of happy, purposeful motion. I put on a playlist of our favorite songs and danced around the kitchen while I tidied up. A goofy, permanent smile plastered on my face. I went to the market and bought all the ingredients for his favorite meal, even though I knew we were going out for lunch. I even bought a silly welcome home banner and strung it up over the doorway. Every little action felt significant, charged with the monumental secret I was carrying. Several times throughout the morning, I'd find myself just stopping, my hand drifting down to my still flat stomach, and I would just beam. By the time I left for the airport that afternoon, I was practically bursting. I drove with the windows down, letting the cool air whip through my hair, singing along at the top of my lungs to whatever was on the radio. It felt cinematic, like the opening scene of a romantic comedy where everything is perfect and full of promise. I got to the airport ridiculously early, found a prime spot at the arrivals gate, and stood there bouncing on the balls of my feet, my eyes glued to the flight information board. When the status of his flight from Chicago finally switched to landed, my stomach did a series of excited flips. He snorts, was here. He was back. I watched the automatic doors swoosh open and closed, scanning the sea of faces pouring out into the terminal. Family members reunited with tearful hugs. Business travelers looked weary. Vacationers looked tan. And then, I saw him. My first reaction was a powerful wave of love and relief that washed over me. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped under the weight of his travel bag. But it was him. My husband. I raised my hand high, waving enthusiastically, a huge smile spreading across my face. But my smile faltered almost as soon as it appeared. Something was deeply wrong. He was walking at a snail's pace, his head bowed, his entire focus on the screen of his phone. He wasn't looking around, wasn't scanning the crowd for me. It was as if he was in a bubble of his own, oblivious to the world around him. I had to call his name, my voice loud and sharp over the din of the airport. Dean. He looked up, and for a terrifying second, there was no recognition in his eyes. It was a blank, vacant stare. Then, it was as if a shutter clicked and he saw me. Audrey, he said, his voice completely flat, devoid of any warmth. He made his way over to me, and I moved forward, my arms open, ready for the familiar, comforting embrace I had been dreaming of all week. Instead, I was met with a stiff, awkward, one-armed pat on the back. He avoided my eyes, turning his head to look towards the baggage claim. Welcome home, I said, my voice a little weaker than I intended. The bubble of my excitement had been pricked. You must be exhausted. Yeah, long week, he mumbled, already starting to walk away. I hurried to catch up, my small suitcase rolling behind me. The short walk to the baggage carousel was excruciatingly silent. I tried to fill it, babbling about my week, asking him questions about the speakers at his conference. His replies were clipped, monosyllabic. Yeah, it was fine. No, he offered nothing, his focus returning to his phone every spare second. It was so profoundly unlike him. Usually, he was the storyteller, the one who couldn't wait to share every detail. This man, this stranger, was a wall of cold indifference. In the car, the tension was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. I put on one of his favorite playlists, hoping the familiar music might break the strange spell he was under. But he immediately reached over and stabbed the power button, plunging the car into silence. Can we just have some quiet? I have a massive headache, he said, his tone sharp and dismissive. I flinched, my hands tightening on the steering wheel until my knuckles were white. He's just tired, I chanted to myself like a mantra. He's jet-lagged and stressed from the conference. Don't be needy. Don't overthink it. Okay, I said, trying to sound breezy. Well, to help you relax, I have a little surprise for you. I made a lunch reservation at the Oak Room. I got us our table. I glanced over at him expecting, at the very least, a small, tired smile. Instead, he let out a long, deeply irritated sigh, the sound filling the small space of the car. Audrey, are you serious? I just got off a 5-hour flight. The absolute last thing I want to do is go sit in a stuffy restaurant and make small talk. Can we please just go home? The coldness of his response was a physical blow. Oh, I said, my voice small. I just thought it would be nice. I figured we'd probably just end up ordering takeout anyway. So I thought we could have a quick, nice lunch out and then you could go home and crash. My voice trailed off. My grand, romantic plan suddenly felt stupid and childish. He stared out the passenger side window for a long, tense moment, his jaw working. Then, he gave a short, curt nod. Fine, he said. Whatever. Let's just make it quick. And that was it. He picked up his phone again, his thumb immediately starting to move in that mindless, endless scroll. He was physically present, sitting just 2 feet away from me. But he had never felt further away. The knot of unease in my stomach twisted itself into a cold, hard stone of dread. This wasn't just exhaustion. This wasn't just stress. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. The 15-minute drive to the Oak Room was the longest, most agonizing 15 minutes of my life. The silence in the car was a living thing. A heavy, suffocating blanket of unspoken words and simmering tension. I kept risking quick glances over at Dean, desperately searching his face for any sign of the man I knew, any flicker of warmth or recognition. But there was nothing. His expression was completely blank, his focus entirely on the glowing screen in his hand. He was a million miles away. When we pulled up to the restaurant, the familiar, charming facade that I had always loved seemed to mock me. The valet took our car and we walked inside. The hostess, a warm, middle-aged woman named Brenda who had known us for years, greeted us with a beaming smile. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, it is so wonderful to see you both. We have your usual table by the window ready for you. Her cheerful welcome felt like a hot poker against my raw nerves. I forced a tight, brittle smile. Thank you, Brenda. That's lovely. We were led to our booth, the same secluded corner spot where he had gotten down on one knee 6 years ago. A nervous tremor in his voice as he asked me to be his wife. The memory, once so precious, now felt like a ghost haunting me from a life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Dean slid into the booth without a word, his gaze fixed on the street outside. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle jumping. He didn't even seem to register the significance of where we were. The waiter, a young man we knew from previous visits, came over to take our drink order. I asked for sparkling water. Dean just grunted. Just water. I tried again. One last, desperate attempt to bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. So, I began, my voice sounding unnaturally high to my own ears. Did you manage to catch up with Dr. Albright? I know you were really looking forward to hearing his talk on cardiothoracic innovations. Dean finally turned his head to look at me, but his eyes were flat and cold. It was fine, he said. His voice clipped. Just fine. I thought you were so excited about that one. You said his research was groundbreaking. It was boring. Audrey. Okay, he snapped, his voice suddenly sharp and loud enough to make a woman at the next table glance over. It was a waste of time. Can we just not talk about work? His harsh tone was like a slap in the face. I physically recoiled, my cheeks burning with a hot flush of humiliation and hurt. I felt small and stupid. I didn't say another word. I just nodded, picked up my menu, and stared at the words without reading them. We sat in a thick, unbearable silence. The only sound between us the polite clinking of silverware from the other diners who were, I imagined, enjoying their own happy, normal lunches. I picked at a piece of bread from the basket, my appetite having completely vanished. The beautiful, joyful news I was carrying, the secret that had made me feel like I was glowing from the inside out all week, now felt like a heavy, indigestible stone in my chest. The perfect moment I had so carefully planned had curdled into this awkward, painful, humiliating ordeal. I kept trying to rationalize it, to find an excuse for his behavior. He's just exhausted. He's stressed. Maybe something bad happened at the conference. Maybe he's worried about a patient. But as I watched him sitting there across from me like a complete and utter stranger, I knew in my gut that it was something more. I thought back to the past few weeks, to the subtle but persistent shift in his behavior, the way he had started working later, the way he would guard his phone, the growing emotional distance. I had explained it all away as the usual stress that came with our demanding jobs. We were both doctors. We both had periods where the pressures of work left us strained and distant. I had assumed this was just another one of those times. I had been so naive. I had been so wrong. Our food arrived. The waiter placed our plates down with a cheerful, "Enjoy your meal." That sounded like a cruel joke. Dean stared down at his steak as if he had never seen one before. He picked up his fork and knife and cut off one small piece, chewed it slowly, and then put his utensils down. I pushed my Caesar salad around my plate, the thought of eating making me feel ill. Still, a stubborn, desperate part of me clung to the fantasy that my news could fix this. That this one perfect, miraculous piece of information could be the magic bullet that would shatter the strange, cold spell he was under. It would bring him back to me. It had to. I took a shaky, deep breath, gathering every last ounce of my courage. The positive pregnancy test was in my purse, nestled safely in a side pocket. I reached down, my fingers closing around the cool, familiar plastic. This was it. This was my last chance to salvage the day. To salvage whatever this was between us. "Dean," I began, my voice barely a whisper. I instinctively placed my other hand on my stomach, a gesture of both protection and anticipation. "There's something I need to tell you. Something wonderful." I was just about to pull the test out of my bag, to lay my miraculous secret on the table between us, when he finally looked up from his plate. He met my eyes for the first time since we had arrived at the restaurant, and his gaze was so empty, so completely devoid of any emotion that it sent a shiver of pure ice down my spine. His voice was low, steady, and utterly flat, cutting through the quiet murmur of the restaurant like a surgeon's scalpel. "I've been cheating on you." The words didn't compute at first. They just hung in the air, a string of nonsensical syllables. My brain, so focused on the happy script I had written, couldn't process the sudden, violent deviation. I thought I had misheard him over the clinking of dishes. I let out a short, tight, nervous laugh. "What?" "I'm sorry. It's so loud in here." I didn't catch that. But then he just stared at me, his expression as unchanging as a stone carving. He repeated himself, this time with a chilling, clinical clarity that left no room for misunderstanding. "I have been sleeping with your sister, with Jillian." And in that single, horrifying moment, my entire world ceased to exist. The sounds of the restaurant, the laughter from the next table, the soft jazz playing over the speakers. It all faded into a deafening, high-pitched roar in my ears. My face went completely numb, as if it had been injected with Novocaine. My husband was sleeping with my sister, my little sister, Jillian, the person I had taught to ride a bike, the person I had helped with her homework, my maid of honor, the two people I loved and trusted most in the entire world. The thought was so monstrous, so fundamentally impossible, that my brain simply refused to accept it. My hand, which had been on its way to my purse to retrieve my joy, fell limp into my lap. The happiest news of my life dissolved on my tongue, replaced by the acrid, bitter taste of the ultimate betrayal. What? What do you mean? The question escaped my lips as a choked, strangled whisper. It was a stupid question. I knew exactly what he meant. The cold, dead look in his eyes. The finality in his tone. It left no room for doubt. But some primal, desperate part of my mind was still scrambling, clawing for another explanation. Any other reality where this wasn't happening. He just sat there, staring at me with that same unnerving, emotionless expression as if he were a doctor delivering a difficult diagnosis to a patient he didn't know. He showed no remorse, no guilt, not even a flicker of sadness for the world he had just detonated. It was like a complete stranger was wearing my husband's face. He began to explain, his voice calm and matter-of-fact, how it had all started a few months ago, after Jillian had gone through that messy breakup with her last boyfriend, Mark. My mind, in a state of shock, flashed back through the events of the past few months, recontextualizing everything through this horrific new lens. I remembered those weeks vividly. Jillian showing up at our house at all hours, her eyes puffy and red from crying, usually with a bottle of cheap wine in her hand. I had welcomed her with open arms. Of course. She was my sister. I made her tea, cooked her favorite comfort foods, and let her cry on my shoulder for hours while she talked trash about Mark. I had told her she could stay with us as long as she needed to get back on her feet. I thought I was being a good, supportive older sister. I thought my husband and I were providing her a safe harbor to heal. But all along, right under my own roof, something else had been happening. Something twisted, ugly, and unforgivable. You and Jillian have always been so friendly. I stammered, my mind still grasping for straws, for anything that made sense. I always thought it was so nice that you got along so well. I was happy we were all so close as a family. We got along very well, he said. And the simple, innocuous statement was now loaded with a grotesque, sordid meaning that made my stomach heave. I suddenly couldn't breathe. The air in the cozy, romantic restaurant felt thick and heavy, like smoke. I felt the phantom sensation of hundreds of eyes on us, even though I knew no one was paying us any attention. The beautifully papered walls seemed to be closing in, suffocating me. I couldn't listen to another word. I couldn't bear to hear another detail of my own destruction. Stop, I said, my voice surprisingly firm as I held up a hand. Just stop talking. The persistent, low-grade nausea that had been my constant companion for weeks. The very symptom of the miracle growing inside me, with a violent intensity, hot and acidic, up my throat. I felt a very real, very urgent need to be sick. Right there in our special booth. In this place of happy memories that was now tainted and ruined forever. I had to get out of there. Now. Without another word. Without another look at the man who had just destroyed my life. I grabbed my keys and my purse from the seat beside me. I slid out of the booth and stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped loudly against the polished hardwood floor, the sound echoing in the suddenly quiet restaurant. I didn't care that we were in the middle of a crowded room. I didn't care that people were now definitely watching. I just had to escape the suffocating presence of him. Audrey. Where are you going? Audrey. Dean's voice followed me as I made a beeline for the exit. But it sounded distant and distorted, as if it were coming from the end of a long tunnel. I pushed the heavy, ornate wooden door open and stumbled out into the shockingly bright afternoon sun, gasping for fresh air like a drowning person. I fumbled in my purse for my car keys, my hands shaking so uncontrollably that it took me 3 tries to fit the key into the car door lock. Once I was safely inside, I just sat there for a moment, my forehead pressed against the cool plastic of the steering wheel, my body trembling. I tried to make sense of the last 10 minutes, to process the information, but it was impossible. It felt like a surreal, Waking nightmare. Then, my phone, which I had tossed onto the passenger seat, began to ring, its screen lighting up with his name. I stared at it, a fresh wave of rage washing over me. I ignored it. It rang again, and again. On the fourth ring, I snatched it up, my anger momentarily eclipsing my all-consuming grief. What? I screamed into the phone, my voice raw and broken. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a desperate, tearful plea for forgiveness. It was his voice, laced with a cold, impatient annoyance, scolding me. What the hell is wrong with you? Audrey, you can't just run out of a restaurant like that and leave me with the bill. You're making a scene in front of everybody. A bizarre sound, something between a hysterical sob and a bitter laugh, escaped my lips. He was worried about the bill. He was worried about what other people thought. My entire world had just been systematically dismantled. My heart ripped out of my chest. And he was worried about appearances. The sheer, staggering selfishness of it was breathtaking. Get an Uber. I spat into the phone, my voice dripping with a venom I didn't even know I was capable of. And leave me the hell alone. I jabbed the end call button and threw the phone onto the passenger seat as if it were on fire. I could barely see the road through the thick, hot blur of tears that were now streaming down my face as I peeled out of the parking lot. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of betrayal and pain, replaying his words over and over and over again. I have been sleeping with your sister. The sentence was a dagger, twisting deeper into my heart with every beat. I didn't know where I was going. I was just driving, my foot heavy on the accelerator, trying desperately to outrun a truth that was already inside me, poisoning everything. When I finally, somehow, pulled into our driveway, the house looked utterly alien. The familiar gray siding, the cheerful yellow door, the neatly trimmed hedges. It no longer felt like my home, my sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene, and I was being forced to return to it. I stumbled out of the car, leaving it unlocked in my haste, and fumbled with the house key. I got inside, slammed the door behind me, and shot the deadbolt home as if that could somehow keep the horror out. I went straight upstairs to our bedroom. Our bedroom. The thought alone was enough to make me gag. The scent of his cologne lingered in the air, a phantom presence that was both familiar and repulsive. I collapsed onto the bed, the very bed we had shared for 5 years, where we had loved and dreamed and conceived our child. And the carefully constructed dam of my composure finally, catastrophically, broke. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my throat was raw and my body felt like a hollowed-out shell. It wasn't a quiet, dignified crying. It was a deep, guttural, animalistic sobbing that came from a place of pain so profound I didn't know a human could contain it. My husband, my sister. How could they? How could they do this to me? The betrayal was so absolute, so complete. It felt like it was physically tearing me apart from the inside out. I buried my face in a pillow to muffle the sounds, my body racked with violent, uncontrollable shudders. At some point, lost in the fog of my grief, I must have heard him come home. I registered the sound of the front door opening and closing, the sound of his heavy footsteps on the hardwood floors downstairs. Then, he was at our bedroom door, knocking softly. Audrey. Honey. Let me in. We need to talk about this. The sound of his voice, trying to be gentle, trying to be reasonable, sent a fresh wave of revulsion through me. I didn't answer. I couldn't bear to look at his face. I couldn't bear to listen to any more of his lies, his pathetic excuses, his attempts to manage the fallout of his own disgusting choices. I just pulled the thick duvet tighter over my head, curling into a tight fetal position as if it could protect me from him, from the truth. He knocked a few more times, his voice growing more insistent, more annoyed. Audrey. Come on. Don't be childish. Open the door. Eventually. He must have given up. The house fell silent once more, and I cried myself into a deep, dark, blessedly empty sleep. When I woke up, the room was pitch black. I blinked, disoriented, my head pounding with a dull, throbbing ache. The glowing red numbers on the nightstand clock read 12:32 a.m. My eyes were swollen and gritty. My throat felt like sandpaper, and my stomach was growling with a gnawing hunger that felt like a final insult. I swung my legs carefully off the bed and tiptoed to the bedroom door, pressing my ear against the cool wood, listening. The house was completely silent. I crept downstairs like a thief in my own home, my only plan to grab a bottle of water and a granola bar from the kitchen and retreat back to the relative safety of the bedroom. But as I passed the living room, a sliver of moonlight from the window illuminated the couch, and I saw him. Dean was asleep, sprawled out on his back, his arm draped over his face, breathing deeply and evenly. His phone was on the coffee table next to him, plugged into the charger, its small green light glowing in the dark. The sight of him there, looking so peaceful, so utterly untroubled, sent a surge of cold, hard rage through me that was so intense it momentarily stole my breath. How could he sleep? How could he rest so easily after detonating my life? I stood there in the darkness, just watching him, my fists clenched so tightly at my sides that my nails dug into my palms. And then, my gaze shifted from his sleeping form to the small, glowing rectangle on the coffee table. His phone. I had never, not once, in 5 years of marriage, looked through his phone. I trusted him. Implicitly. Completely. The very idea of violating his privacy would have felt deeply wrong. A betrayal in its own right. But tonight, trust was a burnout. Smoking ruin. And I needed to know. I needed to see the full extent of the wreckage. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I crossed the room with silent, measured steps. I picked up the phone. It felt heavy in my hand, like a weapon. My fingers trembled as I swiped the screen open. He hadn't even bothered to change the passcode. It was still our anniversary. 0814, the sheer arrogance of it. The absolute, unshakable confidence that I would never, ever have a reason to be suspicious of him, made me feel like the world's biggest fool. How could I have been so stupid? So blind? I opened his text messages, my finger hovering over Jillian's name and her smiling profile picture. I dreaded what I would find, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know everything. And there it was. A secret history of my own personal horror story, spelled out in blue and gray text bubbles. Months and months of it. It was so much worse. So much more sordid than I could have ever possibly imagined. It wasn't just logistical texts about meeting up. It was a whole secret relationship, filled with inside jokes, pet names, and declarations of affection. And the pictures. God. The pictures. Dozens of them. Laughing selfies of them tangled together in the sterile sheets of a hotel bed. Pictures of my own sister wearing nothing but one of Dean's button-down dress shirts and a smirk. Images so explicit they made me feel physically ill. A profound sense of violation washing over me. They had planned their secret trysts with a chilling, casual efficiency. Right under my nose. Her shift ends at 7:00. I can be at the Marriott on 5th by 8:00. One of his messages read, "Can't wait to see you." Jillian's reply, counting down the minutes. "I'll bring the wine." But it was the text from Jillian that truly shattered the last remaining pieces of my heart into dust. In one, she wrote about the thrill of it all. The adrenaline rush of their deception. It's so much hotter knowing we have to be quiet, so she doesn't hear us downstairs when she's asleep. She had typed, followed by a string of winking emojis. In another, sent after what I now realized was a family dinner at our house. She wrote, The sex is better because it's forbidden. Sneaking around behind her back makes it so much more exciting. You were so tense tonight trying not to look at me. I loved it. My own sister. The person I had grown up with. Shared every childhood secret with. Trusted with my entire life. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had reveled in it. She had gotten a sick, perverse thrill out of destroying my marriage. Out of humiliating me in my own home. With shaking hands, I pulled out my own phone from my robe pocket. I started taking pictures of their messages. Of their photos. My camera flashed a series of silent, damning explosions in the dark room. I documented every single sordid detail. I needed proof. I needed evidence for the long, hard war that I knew was just beginning. Each flash of the camera felt like another nail being hammered into the coffin of the life I once knew and the man I thought I had married. Once I had photographed every last incriminating message and photo, a strange and sudden calm settled over me. It was a chilling, unnatural peace. The kind that comes after a devastating storm has passed, leaving nothing but wreckage in its wake. The hysterical grief, the disbelieving shock, the blind rage. It was all gone, burned out and replaced by an icy, diamond-hard certainty. There was no more confusion, no more desperate, pathetic hope for a misunderstanding. There was only the cold, hard, ugly truth displayed in glowing pixels on my phone screen. I carefully placed Dean's phone back on the coffee table, plugging the charger back in, setting it exactly where I had found it. I looked at him one last time. This man who was now a complete and utter stranger to me, sleeping soundly while the entire foundation of our life smoldered around him. And in that moment, I felt absolutely nothing. No love. No hate. Just a profound and empty disgust. He was a void. I turned and went back upstairs. My movements quiet, deliberate, and methodical. I didn't turn on any lights. Navigating the familiar layout of my home by the faint moonlight filtering through the windows. I walked into our walk-in closet and the combined scent of my perfume and his cologne. A smell that had once been the scent of home and comfort, now smelled like lies and decay. I pulled down a large black suitcase from the top shelf. My movements were mechanical and detached, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. A character in a sad movie. I started packing. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I just folded. Sweaters. Jeans. Blouses. Work scrubs. I went into the bathroom and swept all of my toiletries. My face creams. My makeup. My toothbrush. Into a dop kit with one efficient motion. My eyes landed on the large bottle of prenatal vitamins sitting on the marble countertop next to the sink. My hand paused for a fraction of a second and a single hot tear escaped and rolled down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily with the back of my hand. I would not cry for him again. I grabbed the bottle and threw it into the bag. This wasn't just about me anymore. I wasn't just leaving for myself. I was leaving for my baby. I could not raise my child in this toxic house of lies. I would not raise this baby with an unfaithful, deceitful man who had so thoroughly and casually shattered my trust. I zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent house. I froze, listening, half expecting to hear Dean stirring downstairs. But there was no sound. I took one final look around the bedroom. The room where we had built a life together. Where we had loved each other. Where our miraculous, long-awaited baby had been conceived. It all felt like it had happened a lifetime ago to two entirely different people. I carried my bags downstairs, my steps silent on the thick carpet of the stairs. I stopped in the kitchen and on a notepad by the phone. I scribbled a short, simple note. It just said, "I know everything. Don't contact me." I pulled my wedding ring off my finger. It slid off easily. I didn't want the dramatic satisfaction of throwing it at him. Instead, I placed it carefully on the counter, right next to the note. A small, silent. Symbolic gesture that this part of my life was well and truly over. The drive to my parents' house was a complete blur. The streets were deserted. The world dark and asleep. It felt profoundly unreal. Like I was moving through a dream. My mind, which had been a chaotic storm of emotion just hours before, was eerily quiet. I wasn't crying anymore. I was just driving. My entire focus on the simple task of putting as much physical distance as possible between myself and that house. My parents lived in the next town over, about a 40-minute drive away. When I finally pulled up to their familiar, cozy little house, all the lights were off. It was almost 2:00 in the morning. For a moment, parked at the curb, I hesitated. A fresh wave of shame and failure washed over me. What was I doing? Showing up on their doorstep in the middle of the night like a teenager. What was I going to tell them? But the alternative, going back to that house, to him, was unthinkable. I had nowhere else to go. I took a deep breath, got out of the car, and walked up the stone pathway to the front door. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing loudly in the quiet night. A few moments later, the porch light flickered on, and the door creaked open. My dad stood there in his old, worn-out bathrobe, blinking in the sudden light, his hair a mess from sleep. His confused expression quickly morphed into one of deep, immediate concern when he saw my face. My suitcase standing next to me on the welcome mat. Audrey. Honey. What's wrong? My God. What happened? My mom appeared behind him, clutching the front of her own robe, her face a mask of worry. The moment I saw her kind, loving face, the icy composure I had so carefully maintained for the last hour shattered into a million pieces. Can I stay here for a while? I asked, my voice finally breaking on a sob. My mom didn't hesitate for a second. She rushed forward, pushing past my dad, and wrapped her arms around me in a fierce, protective hug. Of course, sweetheart. Of course. You can. Come inside. Get out of the cold. They didn't ask me any more questions that night. My dad carried my heavy suitcase inside as if it weighed nothing, and my mom led me to the guest room, the same room I had grown up in, with its familiar floral wallpaper and old oak dresser. She pulled back the covers, fluffed the pillows, and tucked me into bed like I was a little girl again, just as she had done 1,000 times before. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, huddled under the weight of her old handmade quilt, I felt a tiny, fragile sliver of safety. The next morning, I woke up to the comforting, familiar smell of coffee brewing and bacon sizzling in a pan. For one blissful, disoriented second, everything felt normal, like I was a teenager again on a Saturday morning. And then, the crushing weight of the previous day's events came crashing back down on me, stealing my breath. I laid in bed, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling, and a fresh wave of tears began to stream down my face. I finally managed to pull myself out of bed and made my way to the kitchen. My parents were sitting at the small kitchen table, mugs of coffee in their hands, their faces etched with worry. They had clearly been waiting for me. They didn't push. They didn't pry. They just waited. My mom got up, poured me a cup of coffee, and placed it in front of me with a gentle, "Here, honey, drink this." And then, over that cup of coffee, with my dad's hand resting reassuringly on my shoulder, I told them everything. I started at the beginning, with the miraculous, positive pregnancy test. I told them about the secret I had been keeping, about the perfect surprise I had planned for Dean. My mom's eyes filled with happy tears at this news. Then, my voice started to tremble as I recounted Dean's cold, strange homecoming, the tense lunch at the Oak Room, and his brutal, matter-of-fact confession. Finally, with my voice dropping to a near whisper, I told them the worst part. I told them it was with Jillian. My mother let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth, her happy tears instantly turning to tears of shock and horror. My father's face, however, did something I had rarely seen before. It turned to stone. All the color drained from it, and his expression became one of pure, cold, unadulterated fury. He just sat there, his knuckles turning white as he gripped his coffee mug, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might crack. When I finished my story, the sunny little kitchen was completely silent for a long, heavy moment. That can't be true, my mother finally whispered, her eyes pleading with me as if begging me to take it back, to say it was all a horrible misunderstanding. Jillian wouldn't. She loves you, Audrey. She's your sister. I saw the messages. Mom, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I saw the pictures. She did. My dad finally spoke, and his voice was a low, dangerous growl I had never heard from him before. He is not to set foot in this house again. Ever. And neither is she. He pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked with determined steps into the living room. I heard him pick up the phone. A moment later, I heard him dial Jillian's number. The conversation was brutally short. I could only hear his side of it, each word delivered like a hammer blow. Don't bother denying it. No, I don't want to hear your pathetic excuses. You have broken your mother's heart. Do you understand that? You are no longer welcome in this house. Don't call us again. He hung up the phone with a decisive, final click. And just like that, my sister was excised from their lives. The days that followed were a surreal blur of grief, anger, and legal logistics. My parents were my fierce protectors, creating a buffer between me and the outside world. They fielded the incessant, frantic calls from Dean, with my dad telling him firmly and repeatedly that I did not want to speak to him, and that if he tried to come to the house, he would call the police. My first and most important call was to a divorce lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman my college friend had recommended. Sitting in her office, laying out the ugly facts of my situation, I felt, for the first time, like I was taking back a tiny sliver of control over my own life. What truly shocked me, however, was the reaction from Dean's family. A couple of days after I had left, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. It was his mother, Carol. The moment she heard my voice, she burst into tears. Audrey. Oh, Audrey. I am so sorry. She sobbed into the phone. We just found out. Dean finally told us. Well, he told us his twisted, self-serving version of it. But we knew there had to be more to the story. We knew you would never just leave. What he has done is monstrous. It's unforgivable. That is not the son we raised. It turned out Dean had tried to sell them the same pathetic story he had tried on me. That I was the cold, career-obsessed wife who had emotionally abandoned him, pushing him into the oh-so-willing arms of my sister. But his parents knew him. And more importantly, they knew me. They hadn't bought his lies for a single second. His father, Tom, got on the phone, his voice heavy with shame and disappointment. We're on your side, Audrey, he said, his voice firm and unwavering. 100%. You are our daughter-in-law. And in our hearts, you will always be our daughter. That doesn't change just because our son has behaved like a complete and utter fool. As for Jillian, we want you to know that we will never ever accept that woman as part of this family. Dean has made his bed, and now he is going to have to lie in it, alone. Their unwavering support was a healing balm on my raw, wounded soul. In a world that had been completely turned upside down, their loyalty was an unexpected and desperately needed anchor. They called me every single day to check on me. They were furious with Dean, not just for the affair itself, but for the calculated cruelty of his choice. He hadn't just cheated. He had cheated with my sister. An act so profoundly destructive it was like setting off a nuclear bomb in the center of our two families. They saw the betrayal for exactly what it was. A complete and utter moral failing. And they were not going to stand for it. For 2 weeks, I lived in the strange, suspended reality of my childhood bedroom. It felt like I was in a cocoon, insulated from the world by the fierce, protective love of my parents. I went through the motions of daily life in a fog. I had long, productive meetings with my lawyer, a sharp and compassionate woman named Margaret, who was already drawing up the initial divorce papers. I tried to eat healthy, forcing down salads and grilled chicken for the baby's sake. Even when my stomach was in knots, I mostly avoided looking at my phone, which had become a source of constant stress. Still being bombarded with texts from both Dean and Jillian. Their messages were a chaotic mix of desperate, pleading apologies and sudden, sharp bursts of angry accusation. I didn't reply to a single one. There was nothing left to say. But there was one piece of unfinished business. One conversation that I knew I couldn't avoid. My baby. This innocent little life that was now caught in the crossfire of this catastrophic mess. As much as I despised him, as much as the very thought of him made my skin crawl, Dean was the father, and he had a right to know. Margaret, my lawyer, agreed. It was better for me, legally and emotionally, to be the one to tell him now, on my own terms, before he could find out some other way. I agreed to meet him, but I set the terms. It had to be in a public, neutral location. No restaurants. No parks. No places with memories. We settled on a sterile, impersonal coffee shop chain. One of those places with bland corporate art and uncomfortable chairs. Located halfway between my parents' house and our old home. I got there 15 minutes early. Chose a small, isolated table in the back corner. And ordered a decaf coffee I had no intention of drinking. I needed that table as a shield. When you walked in, my heart gave a painful, involuntary lurch. He looked awful. He had lost a noticeable amount of weight. And there were dark, bruised-looking circles under his eyes. His usually immaculate posture was gone. He was slumped and looked diminished. A small, ugly, petty part of me felt a grim satisfaction in seeing him suffer. He spotted me and walked over, his eyes pleading. Audrey, please. He began before he had even sat down. Just give me 5 minutes. Just talk to me. I know we can fix this. I love you. I held up a hand, a gesture that was both a shield and a stop sign. I'm not here to talk about us, Dean, I said, my voice colder and steadier than I felt. There is no us anymore. That's over. I'm here to tell you something that you have a right to know. He sat down, looking confused and deflated. I took a steadying breath, placed my hands on the table to stop them from shaking, and looked him directly in the eye. I'm pregnant. I had spent days steeling myself for this moment, running through every possible reaction in my head. Shock, disbelief, confusion. Maybe even a flicker of regret. A flash of sadness for the family he had just thrown away. What I was not prepared for, what I could never have imagined in a million years, was the cruel, ugly, contemptuous sneer that slowly spread across his face. He let out a short, sharp, incredulous laugh. Are you serious? He said, his voice dripping with a disdain that was like acid. You're pregnant. And you're choosing to tell me this now. What is this? Audrey, are you trying to baby trap me? Is this some pathetic, last-ditch attempt to make me stay now that you know I'm actually happy with Jillian? The accusation was so vile, so completely divorced from reality. It literally knocked the air out of my lungs. I just stared at him, my mouth half open, completely speechless. He saw my shock as a sign of weakness and pressed his advantage, his words becoming even more venomous. "This is just perfect," he sneered, leaning across the table. "You know, I honestly wish you'd just have a miscarriage." He spat, his voice dropping to a low, cold whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "I don't want this baby. I don't want anything to do with it. Or with you. It would be better for everyone if it just went away." A hot flash of pure, primal rage crawled up my neck, so intense it made me dizzy. In that moment, if I hadn't been pregnant, if I hadn't been so acutely aware of the tiny, innocent life inside me, I swear I would have launched myself across that small table and clawed his smug, handsome face until he bled. But I couldn't. I had to protect my baby. I took a deep, shaky breath, channeling all of my rage, all of my pain, into a core of icy calm. "Don't you worry, Dean," I said, my voice now perfectly level and dangerously quiet. "I am not trying to trap you. I wouldn't take you back if you were the last man on earth. I told you because it was my legal and moral duty to inform the biological father of this child. But let me be perfectly clear. As for me, I want nothing more to do with you. All I expect from you is to fulfill your legal obligation and pay child support when the time comes. You can try to run from being a husband, but I promise you, I will not let you run from being a father. Margaret, my lawyer, will be in touch with your lawyer to discuss the financial arrangements." He tried to argue, to bluster, to get the last word in as he always needed to do. But I didn't give him the chance. I stood up, turned my back on him without another glance, and walked out of that coffee shop, my head held high. I left him sitting there alone amidst the ruins of the life he had so carelessly and cruelly destroyed. As soon as I got to my car, my composure broke. I sobbed as I made the call to his parents. They deserved to know they were going to be grandparents. But they also deserved to know the full extent of their son's monstrosity. Their reaction was one of pure, horrified fury, followed by fierce, unequivocal promises of support for me and their grandchild. It seems that Dean's monstrous reaction to my pregnancy was the final, fatal crack in the foundation of his already crumbling new life. A few days after our horrific meeting at the coffee shop, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but a gut feeling told me I should. It was Jillian. She was sobbing hysterically, her words tumbling out in a barely coherent stream. "He's a monster, Audrey," she cried, her voice thick with self-pity. He told me what he said to you about the baby, about wanting you to have a miscarriage. I can't be with someone like that. I can't be a part of this. It's too ugly. I've left him. I packed my things and I'm gone. I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you." I listened to her pathetic, self-serving apology in complete silence. Her sudden crisis of conscience was about as convincing as a $3 bill. Her regret wasn't for me or for the pain she had caused. It was for herself, for the ugly truth she now had to face about the man she had blown up her life for. When she finally paused, gasping for breath, I didn't offer a single word of comfort or absolution. I just pressed the end call button on my phone and then, with a deep sense of satisfaction, I blocked her number. Her leaving him meant nothing to me personally, except for the grim fact that it now left Dean completely and utterly alone. And the consequences for Dean didn't stop there. The medical community, for all its size, is a remarkably small and interconnected world. While I never breathed a word to anyone at the hospital about the personal details of my separation, stories have a way of seeping out. I got a call one afternoon from my friend Sarah, a nurse in the surgical department. "Hey," she said, her voice hesitant. "I don't want to gossip, but I thought you should know. Things are getting weird for Dean at work. People are talking. Nobody knows the details." "Of course," But the rumor is that he had an affair. And people are definitely giving him the cold shoulder. The man who used to hold court in the doctor's lounge now eats his lunch alone. He was becoming a pariah. His professional reputation, which he valued above all else, was being tarnished. He was a brilliant doctor. No one could deny that. But he had revealed himself to be a deeply flawed and cruel man. And people have long memories for that kind of moral failing. His entire world, the one he had been so confident in, was crumbling around him. Jillian, his exciting new prize, was gone. His family, his financial and emotional safety net, had turned their backs on him completely. His colleagues, the source of his professional pride, were shunning him. And suddenly, faced with the cold, hard, lonely consequences of his own actions, he conveniently decided that he wanted to be a father after all. The text started again. But this time they had a desperate, cloying new tone. The anger and accusations were gone, replaced by a pathetic attempt at remorse. I've made a terrible mistake, Audrey. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was just so hurt and confused. Our child deserves to have a stable family. We can work through this. I know we can. For the baby's sake. I want to be there for you. I want to be a part of my child's life. Please, let me in. I laughed out loud. A short, bitter sound. When I read them, the transparency of his manipulation was almost insulting. He didn't give a damn about the baby. He cared about himself. He was lonely. He was humiliated. And he saw me and our unborn child as his lifeboat. A way to claw his way back to some semblance of the comfortable, respected life he had so arrogantly thrown away. I ignored the texts. But then he started calling, leaving long, rambling voicemails. I finally answered one day, my patience worn thin, intending only to tell him, once and for all, to direct all future communication through his lawyer. Audrey. Thank God, he said, his voice thick with a fake-sounding relief. I was so worried you'd pick up. Listen, I've been doing a lot of thinking and you were right. I need to step up. I want to be the man you deserve. I want to come to your next ultrasound with you. I want to build a stable, loving environment for our baby. A stable environment. I scoffed, unable to help myself. You mean the one you detonated when you decided to sleep with my sister? No. Thank you, Dean. That ship has sailed, been torpedoed, and is now resting at the bottom of the ocean. His tone shifted on a dime from desperate and pleading to sharp and nasty. The real Dean was back. You can't do this, Audrey. You can't just cut me out. You have no right to keep my child from me. What kind of mother are you? Being so selfish and vindictive. You are a bad mother already. You're going to ruin this child's life because you won't let me play happy family now that I've made one stupid mistake. One stupid mistake. That's all it was to him. Years of lies. A profound, soul-crushing betrayal that had shattered two families. Just one silly, stupid mistake. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Goodbye, Dean. I hung up before he could reply. But his words echoed in my ears. He had even gone so far as to threaten that he would make sure our child grew up hating me for breaking up our family. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it was almost impressive. He was the arsonist who had burned our house to the ground. And now he was blaming me for not wanting to move back into the ashes and pretend everything was fine. A few days later, on a quiet Tuesday evening, just as my mom, Dad, and I were sitting down to a simple dinner of roasted chicken, the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, insistent ringing, not the friendly chime of a neighbor. My dad sighed, wiped his mouth with his napkin, and got up to answer it. I heard the sound of the front door opening, and then I heard Dean's voice, loud, demanding, and utterly unwelcome. I need to see her. Tom. I'm not leaving until I speak to my wife. My dad's voice was low and firm. She is not your wife anymore. Dean. And you are not welcome here. I suggest you leave now. There was a sound of a scuffle. And then, to my horror, Dean pushed past my father and strode into the dining room as if he owned the place. His eyes were wild and bloodshot. And he looked like he hadn't slept in days. We need to talk. Audrey, he announced, his voice booming in the quiet room, completely ignoring my shocked parents. I slowly placed my fork down on my plate and looked at him, my heart starting to pound with a mixture of fear and anger. There is nothing to talk about. Dean, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You need to leave. Now. No. I'm not leaving until you listen to what I have to say, he insisted. Taking a step closer to the table, he launched into a rambling, self-pitying, and deeply manipulative speech about how parents sometimes need to make difficult sacrifices for the sake of their children. He talked about how our baby deserved to grow up with two loving parents in a complete home. It was a pathetic, transparent performance, and I wasn't buying a single word of it. I was done. I was tired of his games, tired of his lies, tired of him. Sacrifice. I cut in, my voice suddenly sharp and loud, making him stop mid-sentence. Are you seriously standing here in my parents' house talking to me about sacrifice? That is incredibly rich coming from the man who just a few weeks ago wished that our innocent unborn baby was dead. You wished I would have a miscarriage. For crying out loud. Don't you dare preach to me about family. He actually had the grace to look flustered for a second, a dark red flush creeping up his neck. I wasn't in my right mind when I said that, he stammered, trying to backtrack. I was upset. Maybe once I hold the baby, my mind will change. There is zero chance of you ever holding this baby if I have anything to say about it, I said flatly. You slept with my sister. We are never ever getting back together. Do you understand me? This is over. No amount of your pleading or your pathetic guilt-tripping is ever going to change that. Seeing that his noble sacrificial father routine had failed spectacularly, he switched tactics. He decided to go on the attack, to turn this whole mess around and make it my fault. Well, maybe if you hadn't been so cold and distant, this never would have happened in the first place, he shouted, his voice rising as he pointed an accusing finger at me across the table. You stopped showing me any real affection for months. You were always busy with work, always tired, always stressed. I expected you to slow down your career, to focus on our home after we got married. But you never did. You cared more about getting that next promotion than you did about me. I couldn't help but let out a short, bitter laugh. This was classic Dean. Backed into a corner. He came out swinging, trying to shift the blame, trying to rewrite history to make me the villain of his story. My career, I said, my voice filled with disbelief. Dean. We were surgical residents together. We were co-workers for 3 years before we even started dating. You knew exactly who I was when you married me. You knew I was passionate. You knew I was ambitious. We used to bond over that. We celebrated each other's successes. And I'm not about to apologize for working hard, especially since you were doing the exact same thing right alongside me. This is who I am. But Jillian was there for me. He whined, his voice taking on a petulant, childish tone that was nauseating. She listened to me when I was feeling vulnerable and neglected. And frankly, it's your fault for not even noticing. I was cheating on you for months, Audrey, right under your nose. And you were too wrapped up in yourself and your precious career to even see it. It was truly breathtaking. He was trying to make me feel guilty for not being a better detective, as if my failure to uncover his sordid affair was the real crime here. I was seething. Stop it, Dean, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously low level. Just stop trying to blame me for your disgusting choices. You are the one who cheated. You are the one who broke our vows. You are the one who crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. And even your own parents know it. They have taken my side for a reason. You know, it's because they see you for who you really are. A selfish, narcissistic coward. That hit a nerve. He scoffed, his arrogance flaring up like a cornered animal. Oh, please. My parents love me. They'll be angry for a little while, but they'll come around. They'll forgive me. They always do. And that's when I knew I couldn't hold it in any longer. He needed to understand. He needed to know that the comfortable, privileged world he thought he could always fall back on was gone forever. It was time for him to face the final, unavoidable truth. I looked him straight in the eye across the ruins of our dinner. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I didn't feel a single ounce of hurt or sadness. I just felt a cold, clear, satisfying sense of power. I held all the cards, and I was about to play my final, winning hand. I knew that the words I was about to say were going to completely and utterly destroy him. No, Dean, I said, my voice perfectly steady, perfectly calm. You're wrong. They won't forgive you this time. Your parents are done with you. He let out a smug, dismissive laugh. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're just trying to hurt me. Oh, but I do know. I continued, letting a small, cruel smile touch my lips. I leaned forward slightly. Because, unlike you, I've been talking to them. A lot. We speak almost every day. In fact, they told me that they've already had a meeting with their estate lawyer. They're changing their will. Dean, they're cutting you off completely. You are being officially disowned and written out of the inheritance. His smug expression faltered, the laugh dying in his throat. A flicker of genuine confusion, of dawning horror, appeared in his eyes. He started to shake his head as if he could physically negate my words. Not only that. I pressed on, my voice dropping a little, letting him lean in to hear the final, fatal blow. But all of that money, Dean, everything that was supposed to be yours one day, the house, the investments, everything, it's all going into a legally ironclad trust fund. A trust fund for our baby. You will never see a single dime of it. I watched his face as the full weight of my words finally hit him. It was like watching a building being demolished in slow motion. The arrogance, the confidence, the smug self-assurance. It all crumbled away, replaced by a look of pure, panicked, animalistic disbelief. His face went pale. His mouth hung open slightly. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, he was completely and utterly speechless. The silence in the room was thick and heavy, lasting for a few long seconds. And then, he exploded. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't remorse. It was the pure, unfiltered rage of a spoiled child who has just had his favorite toy taken away forever. You bitch! He screamed, his voice cracking with fury, his face turning a blotchy, ugly red. You did this. You manipulated them. You turned them against me. You are a vile, disgusting, money-grubbing woman. And you have ruined my life. I wish I had cheated on you sooner. He lunged forward. Not at me, but at the table, his body trembling with uncontrollable fury. He took a step towards my side of the table, his finger jabbing the air just inches from my face. I instinctively recoiled, pushing my chair back, a jolt of genuine fear shooting through me. And in that moment, my dad, who had been standing silently in the doorway, a silent, smoldering volcano of rage, finally erupted. He moved with a speed and ferocity that I had never seen in my gentle, quiet father before. 1 second he was by the door. The next he was between me and Dean. There was a sickening, wet thud as my dad's fist connected squarely with Dean's jaw. Dean's head snapped back and he stumbled backward. A look of complete shock and disorientation on his face. He didn't even have time to recover before my dad, who seemed to tower over him, grabbed him by the collar of his expensive polo shirt. He dragged him, struggling and cursing, out of the dining room and through the hallway to the front door. He yanked the door open and shoved him out onto the porch with so much force that Dean tripped over the welcome mat and fell to his knees on the hard stone. "If you ever," my dad roared, his voice shaking with a lifetime of protective paternal rage. "If you ever show your face at this house again, if you ever come near my daughter again, I swear to God it will be the last damn thing you ever do." He slammed the heavy wooden door shut, the sound echoing through the suddenly, blessedly silent house. The deadbolt clicked with a sound absolute finality. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum, my hand pressed protectively against my stomach. And then, a profound, overwhelming sense of relief washed over me. It was over. He was gone. And he was finally, truly facing the consequences of what he had done. If you are still listening, please help me out by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you've given me a like, and it tells me that you've been on this journey with me from the beginning. Your support is a huge encouragement, and it gives me the strength to keep going. Please comment with the number 1 and then listen as I tell you the rest of my story. It's been 8 months since that awful night. 8 months since my father threw my ex-husband out of his house and, in doing so, threw him out of my life for good. It's amazing how much can change in such a short amount of time. The silence from Dean was immediate and absolute. I guess the combination of losing his inheritance and receiving a very real, very physical threat from my dad was enough to finally get through his thick skull. He hasn't called. He hasn't texted. He has become a ghost. A bad memory. And I have finally found some peace. The biggest and most wonderful change, of course, happened 3 months ago. After a long and difficult labor, I gave birth to a beautiful, perfectly healthy baby girl. I named her Emily. The moment they placed her on my chest, this tiny, warm, wriggling creature, everything else in the world just melted away. All the pain, all the anger, all the heartbreak of the past year. It all faded into insignificance in the face of this overwhelming, all-consuming, unconditional love. I looked down at her tiny, perfect face, her little pursed lips and her dusting of dark hair. And I knew that everything I had gone through had been worth it to get to her. She is my world. She is my reason for everything. My divorce from Dean was finalized 2 months ago. It was, thankfully, surprisingly straightforward. He didn't fight me on a single thing. His lawyer and my lawyer, Margaret, handled everything. I suspect his lawyer probably advised him that given the circumstances, he didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Or maybe, just maybe, he was too beaten down and humiliated to care anymore. I was granted full legal and physical custody of Emily. He is required to send a substantial child support payment every month. And thanks to the mountain of evidence I had collected on my phone that night, he also ended up paying a hefty alimony due to his documented infidelity. It was never about the money for me, but it is about accountability. And I will ensure that he is held accountable for his responsibilities to his daughter for the next 18 years. Dean's parents have been true to their word and then some. They have transformed from my in-laws into 2 of my dearest friends and Emily's doting, adoring grandparents. They were at the hospital the day Emily was born, their faces streaked with tears of pure joy. They have completely and utterly iced Dean out of their family. They have set up a substantial, ironclad trust fund for Emily, ensuring that she'll have everything she needs for her future, including a fully funded college fund. They visit at least twice a week, showering her with love, affection, and probably too many gifts. It's a strange, bittersweet situation born from tragedy. but I am so incredibly grateful for their unwavering love and support. As for Jillian, she sends me messages every now and then from new numbers or social media accounts before I have a chance to block them. They're always long, rambling, self-pitying texts filled with apologies and excuses. I read them and then I delete them without replying. What she did is, in a strange way, the greatest gift she could have given me. She was the catalyst that revealed the truth about the man I had married. She saved me from a lifetime of lies. For that, I suppose I don't have the energy to be angry anymore. I don't think she and Dean will ever get back together. But I truly don't care. Their sad, sordid story is no longer my concern. I am back at work now, learning the chaotic, beautiful dance of juggling a demanding surgical career with being a new mom. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most incredibly rewarding. I am focusing on my daughter, on raising her to be a strong, kind, compassionate, and good human being. That is all that matters to me now. When I look at my life, it's nothing at all like the perfect, neat picture I had in my head a year ago. It's messy. It's complicated. It's unconventional. But it's real. And it's mine. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I am genuinely, deeply happy. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you have ever been through something similar, if your world has ever been turned upside down by betrayal, please know that you are not alone and that you have a strength inside you that you don't even know exists. It might not seem like it now, but you can and you will get through it. There is always a new dawn waiting for you. Please share your thoughts or your own stories of strength in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Be well and take care of yourselves.